Welcome to A&B SAT. My name is Carmen Morad. On Modern Assyrian today, I am blessed to have two very special community leaders in the city of Turlock. Dr. JUNN, president of Stanislaus State University in Turlock, and our city manager, Bob LAWTON.
Diversity is a fundamental core belief for me, and this was in part the result of having grown up during the 1960s in my early years in the segregated South in Macon, Georgia. One of the first things I did when I arrived here on campus was to showcase the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and I created a presidential commission for diversity and inclusion.
I would say she's a go-getter. When she first came to Stan State, she saw that we didn't have a diversity center, and within 6 months, boom, we had one.
Where do I begin to describe Ellen? She's incredible. She's a gift to our whole community. She is by far one of the most inclusive, empathetic leaders I've ever had the good fortune to know and work with. She thinks deeply about her students and their needs, and I think Ellen's heart is huge, and there's room in it for all of us.
My father had 3 daughters, no sons, and in the Asian culture at the time that he was raised, having boys was very, very important. I remember him, even as a young child, saying, "You can do anything a boy can do and better." He was highly involved with all 3 of us, and that contributed to us all moving on for the doctoral work, all being highly successful and strong leaders.
I don't think there's a side of Ellen that's not visible because she is so authentic in her leadership. So I think what you see is what you get, and that is a beautiful thing given her remarkable responsibility that she holds in her office and in her role. And she really is always Ellen, and always at heart thinking about what she's here to do and what she's here to accomplish.
Moving into a position like a president is an incredible honor. But it also comes with tremendous responsibility and the possibility of opening more doors, more opportunities, and aligning resources to really help improve the condition for students, faculty, and staff. So I walk through those doors with great enthusiasm and spirit for continuing to do the great work for the greater good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Carmen.
I would like to begin by thanking you for taking times out of your extremely busy schedules to sit down with us and have this conversation on our program, Modern Assyrian.
It's our pleasure.
Let's begin with why we're here and why we're talking about this very important and this task force as a collaboration between Stanislaus State University and City of Turlock on diversity and inclusion. Would you like to please begin to tell us on what has prompted this task force to come to fruition, why it's so important?
Yes, well, I'm pleased to say that part of the reason this occurred is because having an environment, whether it's a working environment, a city environment, one that embraces diversity and inclusion, that welcomes everybody from all their walks of life, is something that's very criterial to me. It was important for me growing up. My parents were immigrated to this country from South Korea. I grew up part of my life in the Deep South in Macon, Georgia, which was a segregated state at the time that I was a child there. So being able to create an environment that is welcoming and inclusive was very important. And as the 11th president of Stanislaus State here at CSU, I came to a city that I thought was perfect in terms of the size. So even though Turlock is the second largest city in our county at around 73,000 residents, it was a perfect size to be able to partner with a pretty reasonably sized 10,000 plus student body university. So if we could form a joint task force to be able to share information, share resources, cultural events, activities, educational events together, we could work symbiotically to really advance, not just saying this is an inclusive place to send your children to college, but it's also a city that welcomes us outside the campus walls. So last fall, I asked the mayor and the city council if they would be willing to entertain a proposal to form a joint City University Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion. And I was very grateful that our city manager, Bob LAWTON, agreed to be a co-chair. So it was voted unanimously by the city council, and the task force is now up and running. I think we've had about 4 meetings since its inception, and it's a very vibrant and I think very promising, exciting venture to partner together with the city. And that's pretty unusual. I will tell you, my assistants did Google searches to see whether there were other models of this elsewhere around the country, City University Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion, and we appear to be one of the very only or very few in the nation to be able to do this. There are different other kinds of joint city university task forces, but one focused specifically on improving inclusion and diversity is one that's unique to us. So it's been so exciting and gratifying to be part of this now, this joint effort.
So it's very innovative.
Very new.
It's a first.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
It might be.
Bob, tell us about the appointment process with the city. As President JUNN mentioned, this was an appointment process and as a collaboration with the city, and I have the privilege of being appointed to represent the Assyrian community. Tell us how that came about and the importance of the selection.
Well, I think one of the unique features of this task force is that both the university and the city are institutionally represented by the president, by the city manager, by the chief of police. But as you note, that representation extends to members of the community. And there was an effort to ensure, at a minimum, a certain distribution of young people, people from different ethnic backgrounds, faith-based. You know, it was a much broader range than one might expect of 2 large institutions simply representing themselves as organizations. This is driven primarily by people, by individuals. And the great thing about the meetings that we have is that there is an incredible array of opinions, perspectives. They're all brought out, and it has been mentioned. It's a safe place to do that. And by that, I don't mean that your assumptions aren't challenged. By that, I mean you are free to express yourself, and it is a respectful atmosphere. And so we get a chance to exchange points of view that we would not necessarily have access to otherwise. And that was, I think, well thought out. Again, this is exactly the kind of end we hoped we would achieve by having those distributive expectations in the founding documents. And I have every confidence that we will continue to grow and reach out farther into the community as time goes on, as our mission becomes even more clear and our presence increases.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I applaud you for that vision. I applaud you for bringing the community and, as we call it in the county, the unserved and underserved members of the community to have a voice and to know that they matter. So let's talk about some of the strategies that you have thought out and some of the events, because we did have an event a few days ago.
Yes. So I just want to alert people that the task force is, although most of the members are appointed, we do have open meetings. It is a meeting that's open to the public. You can find all the information about the agendas, the meeting times, the charge of the council, all on the website. It's a website that's jointly shared between both the city and the university. So if interested viewers want to find out more, they just go to City of Turlock Stanislaus State Joint Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion. It's a long name, but if you just put in half of those words in there, it'll Google it and you'll find it. But one of the central components of the charge and the mission is to provide and create more opportunities for the community to learn about the diversity amongst our residents. And so we're really fortunate that just this past Wednesday, we had a wonderful event called Stand Against Hate, and it featured everyone from our elected officials, including our newest elected Congressman, Josh Harder, representatives also from other offices, and then a whole variety of speakers, which also closed with incredibly compelling, beautiful testimony from 4 students in high school that are international students, some of whom were refugees, sharing their stories, deeply moving stories of their travels and challenges, and then coming and mastering new schools, new languages, and telling their accounts to the attendees. So it was very moving, and it helped to bring together again, I think, the affirmation that we want to achieve, that everyone is welcome and everyone has a unique story to tell about their own families and their own stories as well.
That's right. Everyone has a story.
Everyone has a story.
And it was so moving to listen to those students. And I would like to congratulate the educators, the administrators, and the principal of Turlock High School, who was there and introduced them, to provide that safe zone and environment for students who haven't quite have a full command of the English language, to feel comfortable to get up and speak, and to have the support of other students, and to speak in front of a congressman, to speak in front of a city manager, and president of a university, and others. So that takes a lot to make sure that they have that comfort. And these are future leaders of our city and our community. So, having said that, and I'll let both of you take a stab at this, what does diversity look like in our community? What is the ideal community that has diversity and inclusion? Where do you see this future vision that this task force will reach towards?
Well, I think we're very, very fortunate to reside here in Turlock, as I said, the second largest city in the county, but we're a very diverse county in terms of the makeup of different groups of people. And just as an example, people tend to think of the Central Valley as a kind of a quiet, homogenous place, and in fact it is not at all. In Turlock we're very heterogeneous because we have members in our community who are affiliated, for example, Portuguese, from the Azores Islands in particular. The Assyrian is a very major population group. Many Americans have not had a lot of interaction or knowledge about the Assyrian group. In addition, we have Sikh, another important component of our community. Of course, the white, it's about 51% here in Turlock. We have a smaller percentage of Asian, only about 3.8% are Asian who reside in Turlock. Another about 38% are Hispanic origin, and let's see, African American is also pretty small at 1.8, and then there are a group of residents who designate themselves as other, so maybe mixed race, and that's about another 3%. So we're really fortunate to have such a wide range of different groups, and many different religious, faith-based groups are here in Turlock as well. So we're kind of a kaleidoscope, a quilt of an amazing, interesting stories here, all right under our noses. And the task force will give us a chance to help more people understand how richly diverse and important all the different factions of our community are, and how much we can grow and learn from each other and appreciate and validate the many, many different ways that people have come to this area.
That's beautifully put, because when you mentioned about the Assyrian community, the Assyrian community has a deep history of over 115, 20 years in Turlock, going back to Reverend Dr. Isaac Adams. And as farmers and as immigrants, as members of a community that came to seek refuge for a better quality of life and better opportunities. And as we spoke earlier, Bob, you mentioned about your first experience with coming to know the Assyrian community, for example. One of the beautiful things about Turlock is that we have a lot of festivals. There's opportunities to immerse yourself in that culture and that day. As our former mayor said, whenever he attended our events, he would say, "Today we're all Assyrian." Right? And you had an experience at attending the Assyrian festival.
Well, just to be so completely absorbed into the language, the culture, the food, the ability to learn, the exhibits. I think people do themselves a huge disservice by not reaching out to other festivals, to other opportunities, to be with groups that are unlike themselves. I find I have problems with the word tolerance because that implies holding something at arm's length. You accept it. It may not be pleasant, but you will allow that experience to be in your presence, as opposed to embracing, including, and so whether it is an Assyrian festival, an Italian festival, a Korean festival, an Irish. I mean, we all do better when we reach across those borders, those mental limitations that we have, and get outside of that comfort zone. In this valley, in this city, we have the whole of the American experience condensed down to this. And you expressed it perfectly earlier. The Assyrians who came to this valley, they were seeking opportunity, they were seeking refuge, they were seeking the ability to practice their own religion. And that in the 1600s, that's what gave birth to the settlement of this continent. And every 100 years throughout, there's another kind of wave, and it's bigger and it has a far broader impact than the ones before. And it's great to have, to be able to live in that and experience it now. It certainly, I think it keeps us all young, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't. As you both mentioned so beautifully about diversity and inclusion, as we all know, campuses are a place of expression. How do you propose that this environment of expression, especially with the First Amendment and the highly politically charged times that we live in, how do you provide that inclusion for all, and I mean for all sides, to also have an opportunity to express themselves?
Well, as is increasingly seen across campuses and cities across the United States and even internationally, the issue of being able to voice one's own opinion and to do that in a respectful, collegial way and engage in dialogue and critical conversations is actually pretty hard to do, because people as human beings want to have their own particular worldview and perspective and have a harder time entertaining the notion that there are ultimate other viewpoints that may not be consistent with, but still engaging in that dialogue and that critical reflection, I think, to help understand that there are some common universal principles that apply to all human beings, no matter who they are or where they exist or what their experiences might be. So I think, and in fact, I think of all the institutions that exist, universities are probably one of the most appropriate vehicles, because we are here to help educate and to be role models for students on the importance of critical conversations, thinking, dialogue, and analysis and understanding, deeper understanding. So that's where the scholars help inform students about what the history and the economics and the culture has taught us, and how to express those different viewpoints in a way that furthers the human condition, right? Now, that's a lot of words for something that's much harder to do, because often when it comes to these conversations, there are a lot of emotions involved. And particularly if they are religiously faith-based emotions, it can be very hard for people to listen openly. So I think part of the task force is to create safe environments where we have ground rules of respect and collegiality, and that we're not afraid to discuss difficult topics and differences in belief systems, but to help people understand that at its core, human beings do want to have some sense of meaning and coherence to their world, and philosophies, worldviews, and religions give us that framework. But that the framework that each person chooses can be different, and helping people understand that difference does not necessarily have to equal hostility or denouncement, but that it's a chance to understand more about the different viewpoints, because that is the richness of the human experience, the diversity. And that's what universities can help to promote and facilitate. So that's one of the hopes that we have, that we can bring the community and the university together in both positive, fun things to do, like as you were just mentioning the festivals. Who doesn't enjoy going and trying new food and seeing new dances or cultural practices? That is really fun and eye-opening. But the harder part is when it comes to belief systems, and what is appropriate in one culture may not be appropriately viewed in another culture. And so having these facilitated conversations in a safe place where people can discuss in a collegial way, in a respectful way, I think is getting us a start on being able to improve our understanding and acceptance of each other. And that can be a lot harder to do in practice, a lot easier to say in theory, but we can start to take steps in that direction. And so I think that's one of the goals that I have for the task force, is to create more opportunities to have people who normally would never interact with one another come learn from one another, maybe in this context of fun events like the festivals and so forth, and break bread over food and learn, and then from there go deeper to understand the different viewpoints, and that different viewpoints can coexist in parallel, and that's not cause for one group to denounce or denigrate another group.
Absolutely. We know that food brings people together.
Yes.
It does.
Absolutely.
Food and entertainment and sharing ideas and backgrounds and really learn about each other. And it's one of the things we talk about loving your neighbor and being there for each other and understanding. Let's talk about, in closing, about someone watching this program and they would like to contribute and they have ideas. Can they just reach out to your office, to Nisha Rhodes and Naisha? She's wonderful. This is the room where we meet. We have our meetings. There is dialogue and conversation and respect for one another and a lot of good ideas. We are planning things. We are going to have a presence in the community under your leadership and of course with the city of Turlock. So in closing, I'd like to ask you, what ideas do you have in short-term and long-term goals as far as a city manager that you want your city to be known for with this very innovative task force?
Well, certainly I want to see the work of this task force get larger. This is a nice-sized room, but it's nowhere near big enough to contain the ambitions that we have for the task force. And it's not about the people on the task force. It's about the people that this task force can reach. The eyes we can open, the ears we can open, and what can we do to bring the diversity of cultures with intent to be visible and active with each other, not to separate ourselves, but to express ourselves together. And I think the benefit to that, when I was in high school, I took Spanish for the first time. And it was in studying another language, studying another culture, that I understood that, but more importantly, I was able to understand my own first, because you start to see how other people's language and beliefs, how they fit together. It makes you take another look at your own, and it makes you a better American to understand the people that we live with. So the more active this group gets, and we have policy discussions, but we also have we also explore how can we reach out and be more inclusive with each other. So this room will get a lot bigger as time goes by.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. JUNN.
Yes, I share Bob's viewpoint as well. It's not just restricted to the, 15, 20 people that are on the task force, but we really want to engage and involve many more people in the community. And it doesn't just have to be Turlock. It could be people from the surrounding cities, even the surrounding counties. We want to be able to be a model for bringing in and engaging participatory civic engagement with the city and the university. So we don't want this to be a town-gown divide. We're actually going to eliminate that divide and work together to create a safe, welcoming environment, not just for our students, but for the city and for the surrounding area.
And, at the event we had Wednesday night, I saw people there that I had never seen before, had never seen at a task force meeting, had never seen at a city council meeting, had never encountered. These were residents of our city, of our community, who became aware of this, and they brought themselves to this. And I think that's only going to grow stronger and larger. The more events like this that we have, the more things that we sponsor, the more ways we find to convene those different groups.
And I also want to put in a plug and say I commend you, Carmen, because you have been doing so much. Even this show that you're putting together here with the two of us, Bob and I, is really important because it, again, shows the commitment to deepen the understanding and the possibilities of bringing multiple groups and cultures together to learn, to see the similarities and not just the differences, and to appreciate each other. For creating this marvelous, as I say, quilt of humanity that, at its center and core recognizes the dignity and respect that is deserving for every single human being. And this is one step in that direction. So I just want to thank you for your role in making all of this happen. You've been
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, President JUNN. The pleasure is mine to have an opportunity, whether it's through our media, whether it's through given the opportunity to serve and contribute. And I believe there are many other Assyrian Americans, not just living in Turlock, but in the surrounding cities and counties that really care about this. This is important. And I hope through this program we can cover more of the activities.
Absolutely.
We can raise awareness on the beautiful message that it has, and hopefully we'll have a visit again.
That would be great.
We'd love to come back.
Thank you so much, Dr. JUNN and Mr. LAWTON.
Thank you, Carmen.
This concludes our conversation with the Joint Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion in the City of Turlock and Stanislaus State University. Thank you for joining me. This is Carmen Morad.